What's up, guys and gals of Movement World? It's Sean Mishka, the Movement Miyagi, coming to you once again for Football Beyond the Stats and our Movement Play of the Week this week for Week 8 of the 2022 National Football League campaign. And this week, unlike last week, I'm a little early as opposed to a little late. And that's because this week is the Sport Movement Skill Conference, the 5th annual Sport Movement Skill Conference, where we bring people together from both the science and the art, the theory and the practice, bring them together to integrate and to share from their respective perspectives. And if you haven't registered yet for the Sport Movement Skill Conference, I will put it down in the comments below. And I would highly implore you to consider joining us for what will be another thought-provoking event. But I digress. This week, we're going to get into one of my favorite types of plays to really analyze and peel back the layers of the onion on. And that's when a defensive player goes on the offensive after a turnover. I've often talked here at Football Beyond the Stats about the true versatility and diversity, the adaptability and the dexterity that is typically required when these types of scenarios are presented to players, when these types of problems are presented to players, because they are certainly challenging ones. They are ones that typically involve a ton of perturbations. They are typically ones that stretch players on both sides of the ball to their challenge point and get them uncomfortable. And when we see players get uncomfortable in these ways, we often find that the cream rises to the top when it comes to movement skill and the dexterity of it. So Micah Parsons, week 8, the Dallas Cowboys outside linebacker, facing the Chicago Bears here in what we're going to find from Parsons. And again, last year, he was my top rookie mover of 2021. So this is really no shock or surprise when we see him do what he does. So let's go ahead and see him do what he does here. You can see him right off the bat here down in this right defensive end / edge rusher, outside linebacker, hybrid type of position. And after Justin Fields trying to make something happen alongside of his running back, David Montgomery, we see both sides of the problem and solution dynamics and some of the behaviors that afforded certain other behaviors for both parties. Remember, behavior affords behavior, as we always talk about from our good friend, the late and great J.J. Gibson. But really, we get to see it living and breathing in a play like this, right? Where a player is asked to do something on both sides of the ball that they aren't typically asked to do. And I apologize for that little flip screen here. This is coming from NFL Red Zone and our friends at Highlight Heaven. But you can see Micah Parsons circled there on the bottom of the screen or on the left-hand side of the bottom of the screen. And really what unfolds from a number of different perspectives. And there's going to be a lot for us to look at, as there typically is in our movement plays of the week. But there's a lot to see here. And again, hopefully you're watching the Cowboys and the Bears as opposed to Vikings and Cardinals there on the right-hand side of the screen. But we're going to be able to see some things that I think more across our community, both the movement skill acquisition community, as well as the greater football skill acquisition community, football coaches and the like, could or should be doing to prepare players more adequately for these types of scenarios. Now, the breadth of the problem as well as the depth of the problem is going to be very different than what we typically would find. But let me rewind back for a second there. For those of you who didn't know where Micah Parsons was, I should have probably highlighted it from the start. You can see my mouse circling him now if you didn't see it. Number 11, Micah Parsons, outside edge rusher for the Cowboys. So I'll let this play through again and kind of keep speaking over it because this video from Highlight Heavens gives us a lot. But we're going to be able to see some things from Parsons that again was his calling card last year, his versatility, his all-around athleticism that then channels or underpins some of his dexterity. And remember, dexterity is the ability to solve any emerging movement problem in any situation and in any condition, per Nikolai Bernstein, 1996, right? And we can use this idea of dexterity to really begin to investigate as to how players, when situations change and change dramatically, how players continue to solve problems, remain attuned, be intentional, and become adaptable with their actions to really put this type of God-given and developed athleticism to use. And of course, Micah Parsons also has a motor that is almost unmatched across the National Football League. And we're going to be able to see that on display if you already have it. We're also going to see some blunders, not only from David Montgomery, who ultimately ended up fumbling the ball, running back for the Chicago Bears, but Justin Fields here, and what he did or did not do on this respective play that could have potentially prevented this play from going the distance and having the house call for Micah Parsons in the way that it does. Now, as is typically the case, when we look at these movement plays of the week, remember we're trying to put ourselves in the human movement system of the problem solver, their perceptions, their intentions, and their actions, and how those degrees of freedom at each one of those dimensional levels come to form this integrated movement solution that becomes functionally fit behaviorally to that which what is unfolding. And there's a lot of levels and layers to this, ladies and gentlemen. And I think we want to make sure that we give credit where credit is due on a number of different levels. Now, looking at it slow-mo, you can see, not so much from this angle, you can see Micah Parsons getting mugged here on the bottom of the screen. Number 70, offensive tackle, left tackle for the Bears, just hanging on for dear life. Anytime that Parsons gets up in front of somebody's face and it's a one-on-one matchup, even though 70 does have his buddy 79 here, the guard, coming to assist him in this matter. But Parsons just keeps motoring. He just keeps displaying the effort, but he also just keeps problem solving. And we're going to be able to see that a little better from the other screen. But as he leans and leverages into this, his perception never deviates from Fields, because when he feels Fields and sees Fields, notice I said both of them, he feels it and he sees it. Where Fields is going and how Fields is going to climb into the pocket more vertically, Parsons changes course and adapts, immediately turns his body here. He goes right into 79 where he's now being double teamed. But this is like a layer and a level that I don't want you guys to miss. That Fields himself and his perceptual degrees of freedom, his attunement and his sensitivity is with 70 and 79, certainly, but it's also connected to number one. And this is something I talked about quite a bit alongside of my colleagues, Tyler Yerby, Will Roberts, Carl Woods, and Keith Davids in our Ecological Dynamics Approach to American Football paper that came out in April of 2022. I'll link that in the show notes as well, where I talk about an edge rusher at the elite National Football League level, remaining perceptually sensitive and attuned to that which lies beyond their immediate local movement problem that is presented by a left tackle who's attempting to block them. But their perception must almost always be on the quarterback, because that individual, that information source, or the individual and the information sources about their behavior, is going to be that which channels and guides the coordination of the movement actions. Okay. So now I digress a bit. Obviously, here, Micah Parsons is off the screen. We're not going to be able to see how he's behaving at this moment as this Fields Montgomery, number 1 to number 32 interaction occurs. And we're going to see actually a nifty move from David Montgomery here in the open field versus who I think is Diggs, number 7. And you're going to see some movement, some information movement coupling here, and some movement behaviors that are actually pretty slick from Montgomery. That is, until things go wrong. Okay. And he is just, to give credit where credit due, he's adapting himself, right? He's trying to make something happen. His team is down by 12 in the third quarter. And this is a game that they're, not supposed to win. They're in Dallas and, against a really formidable defense. I want to focus though on Parsons. Of course, like I said, he's off the screen, But because of his athleticism and because of his motor and because of his adaptability, you're going to see him enter the screen really quickly here. Okay. And there he comes right now. We don't get to see that which what leads to the emergence of this movement behavior just yet. We will from that other viewpoint. So you might be able to already remember now that I got myself in so many different things that are happening. I apologize for that. I'm back onto Christian McCaffrey there, who I was looking at before to potentially give him the movement play of the week. So I apologize for that blunder. But again, we're all always adapting, right? We're all always problem solving. The movement Miyagi in our football plays of the week, no different. So now when we look at Parsons entering the mix, I want to look at this little hop that has to take place that then leads to what Parsons does to remain adaptable, but to stay attuned to when the ball hits the turf. You've heard it said that the ball is the program. In fact, just here at the University of Minnesota, PJ Fleck, they use that as their catchphrase. But it actually is true to a certain degree. The ball is almost always a specifying information source, and how the ball bounces and where it bounces, when it bounces, and where it's going could be an information source that one must remain attuned to. Watch Parsons here. And I don't want you to miss those layers here. He's attuned and sensitive at this moment to Montgomery 32 and Leighton Vander Esch right here, 55 on the ground. He has to attune and connect to these information sources in order to time his hop, in order to even act accordingly, and to be able to act upon the affordance for that exists here. And as he does this, this is why we say that alive movement problems and the alive movement problem solving is what is so imperative and important. When guys are on the ground, guys are moving around on the ground, bad things can happen or good things can happen if we're attuned to it. But as soon as Parsons executes this action, look at his perception immediately be drawn to the ball down on the ground, right? Like I just said, the ball is the program. And I know that's kind of cliche, but when we want to remain connected or perceptually sensitive and attuned to the ball and what it's doing, where it's going, and how it's going, because it will shape how we, particularly now in this case for Micah Parsons, as a defender, when you are attempting to create a game-changing play, even though your team is up by 12, you are looking to do something special as a defensive player. The ball is the program. And how do you act in accordance to it? How does it shape the way that you organize your actions? Vitally important when we look at these turnover causing or creating type of plays. So Vander Esch causes the fumble on David Montgomery, and what we see is Parsons just adapts with his hop and his jump and then his leap into where the ball goes. But what we find here, as we're about to see from the other angle, and of course, the friends over at Highlight Heaven say up in the left-hand corner here, what the F is Justin Fields doing? Because Justin Fields had the opportunity to touch and tag him down, Parsons that is, and instead he elects to completely leap over him. Okay. But Parsons, in his highly attuned and adaptable nature, never feels himself being touched down. He never feels himself being tagged in any way, shape, or form as Fields clears him. So what does he do? Highly intelligent and with showing football IQ here, he begins to adapt. He knows that there are people converging, people on both his side. Look at all the Dallas Cowboy jerseys that he sees here. He stands up and he sees, well, first of all, he sees three guys right here. How many of them he's consciously picking up, that it remains to be seen. Obviously, number 27, Curse, is right behind him. He felt him most likely, if we go back a shot or two, right? Because Curse was the one that was battling for the ball with him. But he is very sensitive, very attuned to the fact, like, I'm not down. And not only am I not down, but I have a convoy potentially that could assist me in these orange jerseys that are converging towards me as well. So this chaos adds complexity, more interacting component parts, and a problem that really doesn't look, feel, act, and behave like any other that Parsons probably has faced before. However, Parsons, in his attuned, intentional, and adaptable nature, just starts problem solving more. And that's really what we find here from Parsons now. He knows, I'm going to turn this into a game changing play because some guys in orange are still going. Some guys on orange are claiming, hey, that guy was down. But without knowing, you want to play that out. And these are things that I believe could or should be practiced more, but they are not practiced frequently enough for my money and in my opinion. And obviously Parsons then, as we're going to watch it again in slow motion, before we go to the other screen, in the other viewpoint, Parsons continues to play this out and he just keeps adapting. He's now done too much work and put this play on film for it not to turn into a true highlight for him. And so look at him now in his problem solver mentality, going and making people miss and finding his way to pay dirt. While offensive players, very, very, very little desire to want to bring a defensive player down. That's the thing. They haven't worked on these types of skills in quite some time in many of these cases, particularly if we're talking about an offensive player and a quick turnover. That is a place or an area that represents a huge challenge point and opportunity for growth that I believe more coaches could be spending some time on, because when these plays happen, it's at times of great significance, often great magnitude and intensity. And those players who have the capability of adapting can change plays. So on both sides of the ball, defensive players with a quick turnover, as well as offensive players to the quick turnover, they immediately have to flip the script. The defensive player goes on the offense and the offensive player goes on the defense. What we find is that defensive players likely have a little bit more capability of being able to solve these respective problems. And that usually is because of exposure and experience. Most of these players have played offensive football or an offensive position in American football at some point throughout their career. The offensive players also probably have played some defense, but it's likely to have been a longer period of time. At least that's somewhat anecdotal in what I have from an experience standpoint, working with 108 players over the last decade and a half. What we find is offensive players are wired a little differently than defensive players are too. And a defensive player is just chomping at the bit to see ball, get ball, and do something with the ball. So what you find is that a high intentionality, high desire to become a playmaker on the defensive side, and the offensive player in those turnover situations, they just sort of try to cause more chaos. You see very few players who are looking to make a tackle. Now, as we look at this, and as we get into it again, we see Parsons down on the bottom of the screen. Watch him problem solve while being mauled here. And then being, when I say mauled, I mean into this double team from 70 to 79. But look at this, how he's coordinating his actions, guys and gals. When he sees and Fields begin to climb the pocket, this is something that, so when he Fields going here, you can see he just turns and moves right back on this way, right? And I did that little angle with the arrow or the line so you could kind of get where I'm going with this. He begins to turn and rotate his body as soon as Fields begins to climb the pocket a little bit more. And he goes right into 79, but look at him go move his attention, move his perception right back to Fields. He's in this constant problem solver state of mind. Where's the ball? The ball is the program for Parsons. I'm going to use the ball to remain highly specifying, and I'm going to remain sensitive to it, because until that ball is out of Fields' hands, I cannot move on. And you can see him just navigate this space accordingly. He's not on his horse right now. He's just essentially moving at ownership speed until he has to kick it in. And these are things that I don't want to be lost. Players should not be moving at 100% intensity or speed at all times. If you do that, you're going to get awfully fatigued, and you're not going to be able to live or you're not play a live to another down, play to live. You know what I'm saying? Live to play another down. There we go. The cat's got my tongue here on a Monday morning. But watch Parsons kick in with his acceleration once Montgomery starts moving from west to east and then from south to north, right? He starts moving in that way, and Parsons realizes quickly, not only do I have to chase this guy down, but if I chase this ball down with my motor and with my intensity, something good might happen. And here for Parsons, it does. Okay. And now, like the hurdle a few weeks ago with Josh Allen in our movement play of the week for what I think was week 6, I said that there was very few ways to maybe try to prepare or equip someone to be able to couple their movement actions to hurdling guys that are changing levels. This is another one of these respective situations where we don't necessarily in the practice environment want a bunch of bodies down at the ground that are moving around, changing their speeds, changing their height, and changing their spacing with all-star or all-pro, Pro Bowl level players like a Micah Parsons or any of these other guys for that matter, because there's a lot of money on an NFL football field. We don't want a bunch of traffic, a bunch of trash laying down in the form of traffic that players have to go adapt around necessarily. But if we design representative enough problems, these types of scenarios or situations that we're trying to shape and facilitate skilled intentionality around does sometimes emerge. So what we find is that if we're trying to channel those intentions, say what I do with the defensive players that I work with or partner with, is we're always in this ball hawk or ball oriented frame of mind. Where's the ball? Until the ball is downed, I still have to stay in this problem solver state of mind, oriented around and connected to the ball as highly specifying. In these types of scenarios and situations, I have seen happen out in the practice environment. And I think they should happen more. And we could design slices or snippets of the game in these ways in the same fashion as we would for an offensive skill player, but it very rarely is done. These are highly emergent situations that require highly adaptable and functional movement problem solving. But look at Parsons there, and there's a reason why I keep going back to that, right? This is so slick from Parsons and so adaptable, and it's all shaped by his attunement. His attunement, first and foremost, on how is Montgomery hitting the ground? How is he positioned? How do I coordinate my degrees of freedom to hurdle and go around and over him? And then when the ball hits the turf, can I deal with both information sources? This is high level stuff, guys and gals. And I don't think it's, him not lucky. He's not lucking into this. Okay. This is not happening by chance. He just is a very adaptable mover. And that adaptability is being formed from his attunement, which then is shown again by what we find here with the interaction when Fields hurdles him. Parsons knows he doesn't touch me, even though we see somebody on the side here, number 45, looking off, and we see other guys standing around. Look at 8 here and whatever number this dude is there. And they're both kind of like moving and walking to the space. Even Justin Fields off the screen is just walking off the screen, right? Think about the lack of attunement there on each one of their parties versus Parsons, who knows I now am a playmaker. I now am going into offensive skill mode. 8 completely quits. A few offensive linemen act as if they've quit on it. And then Parsons goes into true problem solver mode. and he already was in problem solver mode, right? But what we find from him is this attuned and intentional nature. Let's watch it in slow motion now as this comes down. This is high level stuff, guys and gals. And obviously, well deserving of our movement play of the week is Micah Parsons, arguably right now the most valuable defensive player in all of football, or at least in that conversation as we speak about it, right? And it is no coincidence that then Micah Parsons, his first NFL touchdown, he finds himself there doing special things on an NFL Sunday, just the way that he has since he's entered the league from Penn State last year. And so I use that to really illustrate for each one of you out there. If you work with players and you think you just want to specialize in their skill, or you only need to spend time helping them polish and harness and fine tune their skill for the position they play, make sure that you're setting up representative problems that look, feel, act, and behave like the sport does in all of its nature. So I'm talking about the depth and breadth of problems that they could be faced with. Defensive players get paid a lot of money, not only to make plays, such as in Parsons' case, being used in his versatile nature from the outside linebacker position, but making game-changing plays, creating turnovers, or gathering turnovers, such as in this fumble recovery type of fashion, and then turning it into something, blowing a game wide open and solidifying things for his respective team. That's the thing that keeps people coming back and game planning and scheming around them. It isn't just the sacks. It isn't just the pressures. It isn't just the numerous versatile ways that they can be moved or positioned from their respective position, but it's the other things that they bring to the table. So we can create these opportunities, and we can get players attuned and intentional and adaptable around what may unfold, even if what may unfold only happens really infrequently. But when it does happen, it happens at times of great significance, and we want to ensure that we're able to capitalize upon it if we're a defensive player, or then on the offensive player sides. Lack of attunement and a lack of adaptability and a lack of effort from some players on the Chicago Bears. So hopefully some of that made some sense. Obviously, like with each and every week, if you like this, give me the thumbs up, subscribe, share it on your social media. If you have questions or thoughts, put them in the comments section below. Look for my Sport Movement Skill Conference 2022 link below too. And I highly implore you, if you are a sport movement specialist or movement professional working with athletes, we have something for you on November 4th and 5th this weekend, and you are not going to want to miss it. So for Football Beyond the Stats and our movement play of the week, this is Sean Mishka, the Movement Miyagi, for week 8. I will talk to you guys in week 9. Thank you all for hanging out with me today.